Great. Well, it looks like we're getting a solid forum here. So, and I know we've got a lot of content and discussion that we're really excited to get to, but a relatively short amount of time. So I think we can get going and hop right into things. So thank you everyone for joining this webinar, which serves as a launch of our report on scaling irrigation for small-scale producers in sub-Saharan Africa. Really excited to discuss some of the key findings from the report with you today. But prior to doing so, I just wanted to cover a few logistics to make sure that the call runs smoothly. So we'll just ask everyone to please stay muted throughout the presentation. And please add any questions or comments that you might have via the chat function on Zoom. We'll be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation, and we'll address a selection of those questions or comments during the Q&A section at the end of the conversation. And please do include in your message into the chat your name and the organization that you represent so that we can include these when discussing your point. And finally, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as well right now. It's always good to put some names and backgrounds onto people and see where everyone's dialing in from. So as a way of introduction, I am Hayden Aldridge. I'm a manager at ISF Advisors, and I had the great privilege of leading this project from the ISF side of things. As a bit of background on who we are, we're a leading advisory and research group committed to mobilizing capital for a more sustainable, equitable, and productive global food system. We've got a long track record of producing leading research on agriculture and food systems with the real primary goal of informing investment strategy for public and private funders. And so we're really excited to focus on this area as it fits really squarely into our mission and expertise. And we were also really lucky to partner in this work with Hystra. Hystra is an impact consulting firm working across sectors to scale business models that solve social and environmental issues with a focus on vulnerable populations in emerging economies. They do that by understanding the key success factors and barriers to scale impactful innovations, as well as mobilizing corporates, investors, public donors, private philanthropies to then enable scale. So we're joined today by Robin Bonsi, Senior Project Manager for Hystra, who led the work from their side of things and will also be presenting some of the key findings during today's discussion. And we also have the great privilege of being joined by two industry practitioners. Gabrielle Schwartz is the founder and managing director for Bonergie, a solar pump distributor in Senegal, and Andrew Massaro, co-founder and CEO of Stable Foods, which is an irrigation as a service business in Kenya. We profiled both Bonergie and Stable Foods as part of our research, and those case studies can be found in the report. And today we're really excited to hear Gabrielle and Andrew offer their own perspective and responses to our findings after we kind of present them here. I won't give a bit more of an introduction at this point and let them kind of introduce themselves when it comes to that. But thank you both for being here. And finally, just want to extend a special thank you to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, whose funding made this research possible. So our goal today is we'll spend about half of our time discussing some of the key findings from the report itself, prior to hearing from Gabrielle and Andrew about their reflections on our findings and own perspectives and experiences in the market. And then we'll end by answering questions and comments from you all, which, as I mentioned, we will select from the chat. So to give a bit of background on, what this project was and how we did it, we partnered with Hystra with the goal of broadly better understanding the current state and the future potential of irrigation for smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa. And we really wanted to take a specific focus on private sector solutions. And our specific goals within that covered understanding the impact potential, identifying key barriers, and really further unpacking those emerging private sector solutions, as well as any future collaboration potential between various actors in the space, including donors and investors and others. And so to accomplish these goals, we conducted a very extensive desk research across 80 plus sources. We spoke with 70 plus stakeholders across government, private sector, academics, donors, investors, industry experts. And I know that a lot of you folks are on the call right now. And so just want to give a special thank you to everyone who spoke with us for this project. Your insights and contributions were incredibly valuable to all of the findings. We also conducted 6 in-depth case studies on specific companies in the space and visited 5 countries to observe these solutions in the field. And the result is a comprehensive landscape report covering 6 key sections across about 180 pages of content. So I know that's a bit of an intimidating number. So we also conveniently made a summary version, clocking in at the far more digestible length of 30 slides. And the intended audience for the report includes really all actors across the broader agricultural development community, private sector, investors, government, researchers, and as well as recipients of irrigation themselves. So kind of gave a bit of a snapshot of the full report on this page here, but I just want to kind of contextualize that given our finite time today during this webinar, we'll briefly touch on some findings from sections 1 and 2 on the screen here, but our real focus of most of our time will be on key findings from sections 4 and 5, so the emerging private sector solutions and barriers to scale and sustainability. And I just want to also make a special reference of there's a tremendous amount of additional detail found in the report itself that we won't have a chance to get to today. And we really do encourage everyone to download the report and review in more depth at your own pace. It's now public. It's available. The link, I believe, has been shared in the chat here. You can also find it on our website, on Hystra's website. We'll email out as well, and I'm sure you'll see a number of different social media channels where we'll be promoting as well. But in particular, I'll just flag that we go into a ton of detail on the leverage points and kind of recommendations, which you'll see here on section 6 on the slide, which really act as the landing point for all of our research and analysis. We go into far more detail in the report itself, specifically around how different market actors such as donors and governments and investors can play a role in some of those recommendations. We'll touch on it really briefly today, but again, given the level of detail, we do encourage everyone to have a read through the full report to see that. So I just want to spend the next couple of minutes briefly discussing at a pretty high level findings from those first 2 sections. And so our research and conversations in terms of the impact case really revealed a really compelling impact narrative for scaling irrigation. And when it fits into a broader set of ecosystem interventions, irrigation can lead to a significant positive impact outcomes for farmers on productivity, income, poverty reduction, food security, and crucially, climate resilience. And I think one of the key kind of things that we walked away from the research was a lot of other productivity or resilience enhancing methods that farmers can utilize, such as fertilizers, drought-resistant seeds, weather forecasting. They all continue to rely on water for production. And so despite this immense impact potential, current irrigation usage sits somewhere between 2 to 5% of total cropland across sub-Saharan Africa, which is far below the global average of around 20%. And this is despite the fact that the region broadly has the water resource potential for expanding irrigation while still retaining kind of sustainable levels of water use. And I will put a massive caveat here at this point that any level of discussion at such a large geographic scale, across sub-Saharan Africa, obscures the important nuance around resource potential at a more local level. We do address this at a more granular, with more kind of granular discussion and research and analysis in the full report. But during today's conversation, we will stay at a relatively higher, continental wide level. And so while still kind of thinking across that more regional level, our analysis revealed that there's a ton of future potential for scaling irrigation across the continent. And roughly about 20 to 30 million farming households across sub-Saharan Africa can benefit from additional irrigation. This is primarily based on existing research from IFPRI, which takes into account, the resource potential as well as other agroeconomic and social criteria. And I know some IFPRI folks are on the call here, so thank you again for access to that data and support on that. And again, we go into far more detail on this potential on a more granular and country by country level in the report itself, including kind of analyzing macro impacts, such as things like country level GDP growth. But broadly, taking a step back, the narrative remains that the potential kind of scale and the potential impact of increasing access to irrigation for smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa is massive. And I think this is a really familiar story for a lot of people on this call, but I think it's a really important way to set the scene, and was certainly kind of the takeaway from our extensive research that we did on these specific topics. And our question then shifted to how can private sector solutions help reach this potential? And so for that, I'll hand off to my colleague, Robin, to discuss some of our key findings in more depth there. Robin, over to you.
Thanks very much, Hayden. Hoping you can all hear me loud and clear. Before we go into the findings themselves, I'd like to quickly come back to a bit of methodology around how we came to them. And so they stem from both a broad sector review that Hayden mentioned, but also specific deep dives. And the way we got into these deep dives was through a bit of a typical process of research, but interviews, allows us to scan sub-Saharan Africa and map 74 initiatives attacking SSI one way or another. We focused on the 41 that were market-based with business models opposed to awareness raising, training, or free distribution. We then clustered these solutions depending on technology and business model type, and we prioritized them depending on scale and maturity, landing on the 6 ventures that you see there as a sample of what's happening in terms of innovation. Hoping that everyone is online today, and I'd like to take the opportunity to really thank them in particular, because most of what we have learned has come from their willingness to open their doors to us. And in particular, you'll hear from 2 of them in a minute. So before we, so now where do we start from in terms of what is the best baseline we see for access to SSI? So Hayden mentioned the overall penetration or rather coverage of irrigation in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, looking at private sector, we have mapped some of the historical technologies that have been provided to African farmers over the last decades in the chart you'll see there, which covers both maps them and on-water accessibility, so the ability for the pump to cover surface to deep groundwater, and then the ability for, with its power, to cover different scales of surface and different segments of farmers. Now, historically, although no one is quite clear on how many pumps have been sold and are still working, and whatever guesstimates we have and numbers we can put together come from perhaps some of the longest standing organizations in the sector, and our friends at Kickstarter, which who are hoping are online, were able to give us these rough numbers. But suffice it to say that perhaps 1.5 million motor pumps have been distributed through retail to African farmers, doing a good job at covering different scales of farms. but of course, not being submersible, limited in their ability to access deep groundwater. Manual pumps have been effective at providing a first step into irrigation for smaller farms, and again, mainly thanks to the pioneering work from Kickstart over the last decades. And then electric pumps have also appeared, but of course with less penetration due to the fact that we have to, of course, get grid connection, which isn't a reality for many farming households. So again, let's consider there's perhaps a couple of million pumps that have been sold in the last decades in SSA, without consideration for how many are still functioning. Now, we have tried to understand what has been preventing the uptake of these pumps, and really starting from the farmer's point of view now. You'll see here, to explain this lack of adoption, farmer journey all the way from practicing no rudimentary irrigation to resilient user of irrigation. So if I'm a farmer with accessible water nearby, I have a waterway, there's also a well, but so far I do a bit of bucket irrigation, but much more. First thing that gets in the way for me from irrigating is the lack of understanding and the risk aversion I may have against this practice, a new practice in a lot of places. That's the first thing that gets in the way. Once I'm convinced of these benefits, I still need to be able to invest in a pump, operate it, pay for fuel or labor, and then if I'm going to be a continued user, I need to be able to repair my pump, have it maintained, and if I'm going to reap the long-term benefits from irrigation, I then also need to be able to consistently sell my produce at the right price and ensure my access water is reliable, and for instance, my well doesn't dry up. So moving on to mapping these, a couple of technologies we've seen previously along this journey. Motor pumps and manual pumps, to a lesser extent, are fairly well known, and what we have seen is that they represent a sizable investment, especially for motor pumps, and so sizable initial investment, high operating costs, especially with some of the energy price spikes that we've seen in the last years. And as for manual pumps, again, fairly well known, durable, cheaper, but of course requiring longer hours of operation, and that's the cost, either cost of opportunity for your own time as a farmer or hiring a farmhand to operate your manual pump. And even for those farmers that were able to overcome these two significant barriers of initial and operating costs, then with the exception of Kickstart's warranty system, there's been very little in terms of support for repairs and maintenance, nothing in terms of providing access to market, and nothing indeed in safeguarding long-term water resources. So this has been the baseline, let's say, over the last decades. Now, in the last few years, there's been no shortage of innovation, and some of the people in this call and the businesses we'll hear from in a minute are testament to that. We have grouped these innovations in three buckets that you'll see here. First and foremost, Paygo, coupled with solar water pumps, has really made a dent, with 50,000 units sold since 2018, with most of them, as we understand, coming from a bit of the leader in the sector, and our friends at Sun Culture, who I'm hoping also are with us today. In terms of irrigation as a service, which again, at let's say still a more nascent scale, our friends of AgriWorks and Andrew from Stable Foods, that we'll hear from in a minute, have really put together very innovative business models that we think have a lot of potential, and that I will be describing in the next slide, just to go into a bit more detail of what's behind these innovations. So first of all, starting with solar pumps with Paygo, and I'm sure most of all of you know about the use of Paygo in access to energy, and it's been applied to irrigation through solar water pumps. and it has played been a bit of a game changer for farmers, being able to finance their irrigation kits. Again, the provider sells irrigation kits to farmers through its network, has it installed. The farmer pays an initial down payment, maybe from 10 to 30%, and then is able to make monthly repayments. Different installment plans exist, more or less tailored to the farmer's benefit of and seasonality of income. And we'll be glad to hear from Gabrielle of how they managed to tailor this payment plan to the farmer's income. Mobile irrigation as a service. Friends of AgriWorks have come together with a very ingenious system of mobilizing bodabodas, so motorbicycle taxis, as mobile irrigation agents, taking advantage of the engine on the motorcycle to power a pump that allows irrigate farmers' fields that are nearby, surface water, and then the farmer just picks up the phone and calls a certain number of hours of irrigation, and that he or she is then able to operate along the agent on its motorcycle. So again, a very mobile solution. The third business model that we identified, and we'll hear a lot more from Andrew in a minute, is fixed irrigation as a service, where the business, the provider, installs a fixed, fairly sizable solar pump that then connects onto neighboring farmers in dense enough areas, and farmers then pay for access to this water with a monthly subscription on a per acre basis. And as we heard from Andrew, then inputs and market access is the next play, and a lot of the value that can be then provided to the farmer. So let's come back to our farmer journey, and all of the barriers they encounter, and let's see and try and understand and see how these business models have helped overcome some of them. So you'll see here that again, the three business models, PAYGO, fixed irrigation service, mobile irrigation service, have done a very good job in unlocking the investment operating cost hurdle, and reducing therefore the risk and cost of failure for farmers. So perhaps with a bit of a caveat on of course the PAYGO, where we know that the cost of down payment is still a barrier for some farmers, and hoping to get more contributions from guests on how we further advance that. But beyond just the acquisition and operating costs, I think what's really virtuous in these models is that they manage to align the interests of the provider with the farmer, between creating a virtuous loop, a virtuous cycle between repayment and service. And of course, so it's particularly true for irrigation as a service, because if you're not getting water, you're not paying for it. And then of course the ability for PAYGO providers to remotely switch off and eventually repossess their equipment also puts pressure on the farmer to make his or her payments. As far as access to markets is concerned, we see that, we'll see in a minute, that fixed irrigation as a service does have quite a bit of potential to ensure that this is a reality for farmers. But we also know that a lot of PAYGO providers are trying to extend into off-taking and connecting farmers with buyers. Hopefully there's probably been some progress there. We're looking forward again to hearing from guests. And as far as reliable access to water is concerned, which is the last of the barriers towards farmers' sustained irrigation use. So again, fixed irrigation as a service creates an incentive to use, for instance, water-efficient drip lines, so that the network can be further extended. And this is something that these incentives for efficient water use is something that all of the models we are hoping as well can ultimately push forward to. So that's the good news in a nutshell of all of the progress and the unlocks that these business models are bringing to the farmer. Let's take a look at the job that remains to be done, and all of the remaining barriers that need to be lifted for SSI to really reach its full potential scale. Again, we are starting from our farmer lens and the barriers that they experience and the solutions that these models are providing. So most of the slide at the top you'll see is focused on PAYGO as perhaps the most mature of these emerging models, and we have tried to map here the remaining challenges for both farmers and the challenges for PAYGO providers, which in our view must be overcome in order to allow the sector to again fully develop and reach its potential. I won't go necessarily in detail through all of them, but you'll see that we have grouped all of these issues into four main buckets. And to recap them, and again, there's a lot more detail in the report, but investment for farmers is still a challenge, and we know from Bonergy's trials, from some cultural trials as well, that the elasticity of the demand is high, and that farmers are very sensitive, including to the upfront cost and the down payment they still have to make. Integrating this financing, of course, has a cost to the providers that themselves have to bear the brunt of the working capital, which is needed to extend this financing. And again, looking forward to hearing from Gabriel and some of the win-win partnerships being able to build with MFIs in particular. As every nascent solution or business model, there's still a lot of room for improvement on delivery models to lower the cost, for instance, of clients acquisition, last mile delivery, or ensuring market access towards a more holistic solution for farmer. And last but not least, the exception of XAIS and drip irrigation, the incentives to preserve the water resources remain limited. And so it's really with these barriers in mind that we have tried and formulate 4 key leverage points for every interested stakeholder to focus on and drive some progress in the sector. So you'll see here are barriers on the left, those we've just covered. There's others that are more linked to the enabling environment in terms of missing knowledge capacity or political and institutional shortcomings. We believe that all of these barriers can be addressed through a series of leverage points. And again, much more detail in the full report. I'll just quickly voice over before handing over to our practitioners some of the illustrations of the recommendations we make. But so, for instance, on improving the affordability of quality irrigation products, which remains a key driver for demand. There's plenty of opportunities for public authorities to extend targeted subsidies by tax exemption, as has happened in quite a few geographies already. There's plenty of opportunities of donors to help reduce the cost of, for instance, of borehole drilling, which remains a major barrier today. Also investing in pump themselves through scaling automation efforts, and including from our friends of Future Pump, we're putting a lot of investment into that specifically. Unlocking access to finance, again, and covering these working capital costs is also something where donors should step in, unlock some development finance, and financial institutions should do a better job of building partnerships between themselves and PAYGO providers. In terms of improving business model efficiency and replicability, there's also a lot of potential for donors, financial institutions, and public authorities, to de-risk the expansion of successful providers in countries where today they don't exist. And there's also the opportunity to use extension workers as pillars of irrigation development by building up their capacity and knowledge. And last but not least, around the guardrails for sustainable growth, irrigation management information systems are a key part of the future where extraction is monitored and managed at the national or regional level. And again, donors have a key role to play there. So we believe that all of these recommendations put together through these key leverage points have the potential to contribute to important outcomes, whether accelerating the scaling of solar pump with PAYGO, allowing the irrigation as a service to emerge as a very powerful solution. And again, last but not least, achieving growth in a stable manner and safeguarding the long-term availability of water resources. I will stop here and hand it over to you, Hayden, before we hear from our competitions.
Great. Thank you, Robin. And again, to reiterate, as well as going into more kind of depth and detail into those leverage points and recommendations that Robin touched upon there, we as well kind of put them in a bit more kind of specific geographic context by selecting a few specific countries. So you can see all of that with more detail and depth in the full report. But as mentioned, we'd love to, we're very lucky to have two leading practitioners from the space join us here, Gabrielle and Andrew. And so I'd love to maybe start with you, Gabrielle, to, first and foremost, provide a bit more of an introduction of yourself and Bonergie beyond what has already been mentioned here. And then also to kind of hear your high level, responses and perspectives of, specifically around some of those barriers that we presented and spoke through, and whether or not that resonates with your experience and in the field. So, Gabrielle, over to you, and then Andrew, we can hear from you after.
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much, Aidan. Robin, hello again. First of all, let me thank you for this very extensive study, which is really, really necessary, and it comes at a good time. My name is Gabriele Schwarz. I'm the founder and managing director of Bonergie. Bonergie is a solar company in Senegal. We exist since 2011, and we have currently 5 subsidiaries and about 52 employees, all young Senegalese. Our strategy is to focus on the value chain of agriculture and supply solutions for this market. And if you look at the value chain of agriculture, the first thing you need to do is to look at the area of production. That's why we have started with solar pumping and solar irrigation systems. Our strategy is here to work with already, I would say, quite professional farmers already. So we are still in smallholder farmer business, but it's not smallholder farmer business. Yeah, it's already farmers that have at least 1 or 2 hectares or more land, and they do already business, that meaning that they are producing agriculture in order to sell it. Yeah, in comparison, if you look at the very smallholder farmers, there is still this mix of subsistence farming, and if they have a little bit surplus, they sell. So we have our market are the a little bit bigger farmers, and we are in Senegal, as I said, and this is also let's say the setup. Yeah, we don't have so many very smallholder farmers. We have more professional farmers, and there are already some agricultural centers that have developed. And these farmers have already irrigation systems in place. They use diesel-powered pumps, and we propose to them to have a transition towards renewable energy solutions, like with solar pumps and irrigation systems, which is very, very important for these farmers, because if they use diesel-based pumps, they spend sometimes between 40 to 50% on their revenue on diesel, which makes it really, really difficult to be profitable. So when we propose our solar pumps, they are immediately convinced. Yeah, they know that this is their solution. The question is, how are they going to pay for it? Yeah, a solar pump is a lot more expensive than a diesel pump. And these farmers, yes, they have revenues, but they don't have cash. That's why we had to come up with a solution to offer with our solar pump also the possibility to pay the pump in installments. And in the beginning or up to now, this financial offer we have to do ourselves, because the local banks consider this market still too risky. You know that banks, they look more at risk than at opportunities. But this is now changing slowly, because we have given the proof that this business model works. Yeah, we have installed so far a little bit over 1,000 pumps and also irrigation systems, because we are also convinced that if we want to scale that, we need to be very careful with the water resource. So you know, you have examples in India, in Morocco. If you scale solar irrigation without any, let's say, consideration of the water resource, this can cause quite big problems. That's why we offer solar water pumps and also solar irrigation systems, drip irrigation systems. We also in our offers are storage systems. We build for the farmers water tanks so they can store the water and irrigate when they want. Yeah, if you do solar irrigation directly with the sun, you need to irrigate when the sun is shining. But a lot of our farmers would like to irrigate very early in the morning or in the evening. So this is a whole ecosystem or a holistic approach, I have to say. You have to look at it when you address this market. And like we are selling on a, let's say, on a credit basis, our pumps, and our farmers can do a small down payment of on average 20%, and they can now pay the rest of their invoice between 18 and 24 months. Mm-hmm. And to secure this business model, which is really ideal for the farmers, yeah, this is really responding to their need. We have developed with our main supplier, which is the German manufacturer Lorenz, which with a very high quality pumps, which can be scaled as well. We have developed a PAYGO solution where we can control the pumps remotely, and this solution generates codes depending on the amount of money the farmer pays. Yeah, so if he pays for 20 days, he gets the code for 20 days. If he pays for 100 days, he gets a code for 100 days, which was also a very big need. You showed it in your slide, Robin. PAYGO with regular monthly payment does not respond to the need of farmers. They don't have monthly income. They have harvesting periods. And also depending on the crops they are doing, if they do potatoes or tomatoes or onions, this varies. That's why we said, okay, you are flexible, pay whenever you can, but when you don't pay, the pump stops. Yeah, so this is securing our business model. And this works very, very well. And banks are becoming now slowly interested in it, and we have now signed three contracts with partnership contracts with local banks who are interested now to finance our customers, which is a really big step because we are a solar company, we are not a bank. Yeah, but with our business model, became almost a bank, and we would like to that the people do the work they are specialized in, and we could now concentrate more on our technology, on our innovation, and also to grow our market. Yeah, so I would say we have passed the system, we have passed the pilot phase. we really have to look now into scaling.
Yeah. Thank you, Gabriella. Really, really helpful. And I think we can unpack a couple of those things you said. But Andrew, I want to switch over to you maybe for a quick introduction on, stable foods and the approach that you're taking, a slightly different approach to solve some of these things. And so, yeah, over to you, Andrew.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Thomas and Robin and the rest of the team. It is a really great report. In fact, I've already taken some notes for our pitch deck. So guys, my name is Andrew. I'm the CEO of Stable Foods. We've been actively working for the last 18 months, so since fall of 2022, and we are based in Kenya. In one sentence, we solve the problem in the sixth column of Robin's chart. For those of you who don't have it memorized, that's the water access problem, meaning our target customers are the millions that don't have a pond or a river on their land, and they don't have enough money to dig a hand-dug well. For those people, we're the solution. In short, we make water access to the masses. So how do we do it? It's similar to a telecoms model. Everyone has a cell phone tower somewhere nearby their apartment or their place of work, whatever, but no one pays for that cell phone tower. You just pay for the data and the minutes. Very similar to us. We build large water access systems that smallholders would never be able to afford or design and implement, etc. That's on us. That's our money, our investment. And then we deploy the water through drip lines, drip irrigation, onto farmer partner land. And then farmers, with no capex, nothing to buy, no loans, they pay us a small monthly fee for access to the water. Again, just like telecoms. I buy the data in the minutes that I need for that month. Our farmer pays for the water that they need over a certain period of time. Then they farm. And it works for sort of two groups of farmers. It works for the ones that Gabriella just mentioned, sort of those semi-professional farmers that already are farming, already have maybe market access. That's great. We make their life a lot easier. But it also works for farmers that previously were subsistence farmers. So that's a big part of our mission, is to transition subsistence farmers that were previously producing almost nothing and then turning them into small-scale commercial farmers. That is where you see the big impact and the big lift. So, but back to how it works. Once we've deployed our drip lines, farmers pay us for access to the water. Then once they have a reliable access to water, then they can start really transforming how they farm. They can start doing higher value crops. They can do hybrid seeds. They can do 3 harvests per year. They can do counter-cyclical selling, all of those things that irrigation unlocks, but for a small monthly fee. Right now, we are charging around $40 per acre per month. We're planning on increasing that price to around $60 per acre per month for a variety of business reasons. From a business perspective, I think our model works very well. We have a high level of stickiness. Obviously, just like you don't need 2 electricity providers, you only need 1 irrigation provider. And frankly, it helps us achieve all of our goals. We are a mission-driven for-profit company. It reduces food insecurity, and it creates thousands of agricultural entrepreneurs. So that's a little basis just in the company. And I think to the team that was asking earlier, so what are of the 6 barriers? I think the ones that really stick out to us the most is number 1, obviously number 6, we solve the water access barrier. But then of course, we do need to make sure that the operating cost is appropriate. Like I said, it's about $40 a month now, but if it's $60, $70, how does that change the business model? Can they still do low value crops and be successful and be profitable? The answer is yes. We just need more flexible investors. And then interestingly, I'll say that we sort of got into the business planning on just providing water, but it was so clear in all of our conversations that water was an important first step. But if you don't do market access on the other side, you're not really helping your farmers monetize that investment. Again, if we're trying to go from subsistence to commercial, people that made 500 or 1,000 kilos a year, and now they're making 15,000 kilos a harvest, they need to have a place where that product is going to go. So we do offer, in some situations, guaranteed market access for the farmers that need it. Yeah, I'll leave it at that, trying to keep it clean. Back to you, Aldridge, or Hayden, excuse me.
Thank you, Andrew. Really, really interesting and helpful stuff here. I have a couple of more questions for both of you, but maybe, Andrew, there's a question in the chat directed at you that I'll just flag around, who owns the water resource and how's that kind of managed and controlled? And I think that also has some broader implications as well to a couple of other questions further up, but I'll just let you maybe briefly answer that and we can circle back.
Absolutely. So the water resource is owned by either you could say the county, the community, or the national government. We don't own the water. We have basically usage rights. So in Kenya, I don't know what it's like in other countries. We will eventually expand, but well, please someone write us a check and we'll be there immediately. But in Kenya, it's WARMA, Water Resource Management Agency. We fill out a form, 20, 30-page document, environmental assessment, social assessment, all that stuff, water availability, precipitation, and everything. And then the government basically tells us how much we're able to pump. And of course, same thing with boreholes, right? You do the borehole, you do the testing, the refill rate, and all those sorts of things. Based on how much we expect to use, we pay a certain fee. The fee is good for 5 years, so we have 5-year permits, and then we'll just keep going and going. As was mentioned at the very beginning, it's not necessarily that there's a shortage of water, and yes, we're definitely not Senegal or Morocco or super dry countries. There are dry areas of Kenya, but it's just that the water that is here isn't very productively used. It's not that it isn't available, it's that it isn't accessible. Even in the ASAL, arid semi-arid land of the north, there's 3 billion liters a year of unutilized water that is drained into a saline system, either Lake Turkana or the ocean. So there are definitely ways to get around it, for sure.
Great. Thanks, Andrew. And
Sure.
I think maybe in a few minutes we can circle back to that because I've got a couple of responses as well. But maybe just while we've got the two of you here, Gabriel and Andrew, I think you've both alluded to this a couple of times, but maybe really briefly, and I'll start with you, Gabriel, and then Andrew. Very, very kind of briefly, what are the key things that when you think about your own business and scaling your own business and scaling that as a way to then increase access ultimately to irrigation for farmers, what are the couple of key things that you need to enable your business to scale and that can also draw on past whether it's investments or partnerships that you might have in the past as well. So Gabriel, I'll start with you briefly and then Andrew.
Yes, Hein, I think the main issue is still capital. If you look at the Bonergy business model, which is very capital intensive, we have to buy all our material and sell it and distribute it and install it, and it's logistic is a huge issue, and then we get paid small amounts. Yes, they come in and we have a recovery rate of above 95%, but this working capital, this is still an issue for companies like ours. But I think also if you look at the side of the clients, if this is purely commercial and they have to buy a pump and pay back the credit, this works, but this will stay small. You can address only a number of farmers that can afford it. But if you look at the questions of food security, climate change, and all these kind of things, it needs to be scaled. And I think the customers really need to have some more support. They need to have a part, maybe a donation. They need to have support from technical assistance, access to market, like Andrew is saying. If they don't sell their products, they cannot afford a pump. This is simple, and it needs to be this ecosystem and also a multi-stakeholder approach. Everybody needs to be around the table and look at the problem, and say, okay, if we want to scale agriculture, which is a real big issue here in Senegal, because of food security. Senegal is importing still 70% of their food, which can be dramatic soon. we need to look at all the questions. It's not only how to sell solar pumps. This is not the solution.
Yeah, it's a really great point, and I think going back to a lot of the research that we did at the start of this, thinking about the impacts case and kind of the future potential, we were very keen on kind of emphasizing that this fits within a broader ecosystem of interventions and kind of things that need to happen for development, right? And so very crucial, but doesn't exist in a vacuum. So I think that's a really great point. And maybe very quickly, Gabrielle, while I have you here, there was also a question in the chat for you about how the role of the investment from InfraCo Africa played in your business's journey.
Yeah, so we were very lucky to have InfraCo as an investor, and we have constructed a so-called SPV, a special purpose vehicle, which is focusing only on solar irrigation. Yeah, Bonergy is doing other products as well, like also now cold chambers and electrification projects. And the partnership with InfraCo allowed us to have the necessary working capital. Yeah, we have set up an objective to have to distribute 2,000 pumps and 500 irrigation systems, and this partnership is really helpful. Yeah, because remember, we are a solar company. Yeah, we are not finance experts, and that's why it's so very necessary to partner with people who have this experience. Yeah, and who can also provide us with assistance in these kind of questions. No, also how to scale the company. Yeah, you need partners.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Andrew, I want to shift back to you and a couple of the key things that from your own business you view as crucial for scaling.
Sure, absolutely. And some of them I think Gabrielle articulated already very well. I won't start with money, but I will get there. One, I'll just say convening, similar. There are a lot of organizations, there's a lot of ag companies. I mean, there are probably 1,000 nonprofits that work in ag in Kenya alone. I don't have 15 years of experience in that industry. I would literally pay money for a list of senior managers and directors in companies that would be willing to take my call. Sometimes we get like the little guys, but the little guys, they're not able to make any executive decisions. They're not able to see the possibility of visions. And so getting those groups together would be very, very valuable for me. Two, again, to Gabrielle's point about not overusing your water systems, Kenya does have a lot of water, but we still don't want to misuse it. So better information about water. I'll say a little anecdote. IWMI and FAO, they put together some really great stuff recently about water availability all over. And it's amazing, and it's specifically for the private sector so they can use it. And I've emailed them 3 times to see if I can get training on it so I can use it, and I haven't gotten any replies. So the stuff is out there, but it just isn't easy for private sector to use it. I don't have time to get a PhD in hydrology while I'm running the business. And then thirdly, I will say, it's not just more money necessarily, but what I would say is from an investor perspective, one of the things that I find a bit challenging is many investors are really hesitant to engage in a business that is CapEx heavy. And I wouldn't even say we're CapEx heavy. Our target by the end of the year is $1,000 per installed acre. But my question to them is, when you think about all the other mega agricultural producing countries and companies of the world, Netherlands, Brazil, United States, whatever you want to call it, do you think they were able to achieve that without CapEx investment? No, of course not. So then why would we be expecting the same for smallholder farmers in Western Kenya? It is, I don't know, I find it a bit duplicitous and eye rolling a bit, if I may be frank. Sorry if I'm being a bit too honest. But those are sort of the major three: convening, better information about water, more faith from investors. I wrote a fourth, and it aligns with one of the last things you guys mentioned about policy/institutional barriers. Technically, the government of Kenya has an entire department, entire ministry under agriculture that is about setting up irrigation systems. Both internally and externally, private and public sector, I've never heard a single story about them being a success, even from the people that work in the organization themselves. So I suppose that's a lot of the, how do I say, infrastructure that is there for the usage. But I'll be frank, I'm quite hesitant to borrow anything or utilize anything that the government of Kenya paid for I think reasons that probably don't need to be explained.
Thanks, Andrew. Really interesting. And I know we're coming up on the hour mark here, and so we've just got a few more minutes, and we've been monitoring the chat for questions and comments, and it seems like virtually all of them we've either been able to answer directly, or I think Andrew and Gabrielle have answered. I just want to kind of highlight one from Christine around steering large-scale adoption to areas that have adequate groundwater supplies and resources. And again, we go into a ton of depth in the report on this, and I think actually both Gabrielle and Andrew, you referenced this as kind of a core part of each of your business models. And you both actually reference as well one of the other key parts that we see as crucial around information management systems and just the granularity and availability of data. And Andrew, you kind of reference some of that. There's a ton out there, and oftentimes it's an accessibility thing, right? Or how do you kind of link a lot of the higher level, really great data that exists and the work that exists? How do you then link that to actual kind of action on the ground? And how do you allow private sector players like yourselves to access it? How do you allow farmers to access it? So that I think is a really key part. And thinking back to Robin's, kind of the different leverage points, the final one being, how do you do all of these and scale these things sustainably? There's a lot of ways in which it can be done sustainably. There's a lot of ways in which it cannot be done sustainably. And we go into more detail in the report as well. But at this point, I know we're out of time. Really, really happy to be joined by both Gabrielle and Andrew here. So thank you both for your insights. And I do encourage everyone on the call to reach out directly to those two as well. I think to Andrew's point, one of the kind of key parts of this is getting people together. There's a lot of folks thinking really hard and in a sophisticated manner about this space, and we want to kind of use this as the start of a bit more of a broader dialogue. And to that end, thank you all for joining. As I think we've put into the chat, and we'll also email out to everyone who's registered. The link is now public, and the report is published. And we're really excited to get it out there, and we think this is just the start of a broader conversation with everyone. So looking forward to hearing feedback and insights from everyone. And please feel free to reach out to myself or Robin, ISF or Heisher, or both of us, to discuss this in some more depth. And looking forward to continuing the conversation. And thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.